All right. Welcome, everybody. I have Cooper Turley with me. And this is one of my favorite people to talk to about the intersection of crypto, culture, community. So first off, Cooper, thank you for joining me. And let's start off with a quick intro, bit of background about yourself before we get into all the things that you're doing.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I've been working in crypto for about 5 years. I really love community, try and do a lot of stuff around curation. So the past couple of years, I've been figuring out what is the intersection of community and culture. I've been working in crypto mainly on the community side since fresh out of college. I went to school for music business, saw that there was an opportunity for smart contracts to expedite royalty payments in the industry. And so fell down this crypto rabbit hole as a way to help solve that issue in particular, and more broadly, just to be an early curator in a new industry. And so I spent my early time in crypto in the DeFi wave, doing journalism and covering DeFi summer. Woke up one day and realized that high APYs weren't really getting the job done for me. And so stepped into what I like to call the creator economy. So this is things like NFTs, social tokens, and DAOs, basically figuring out how to activate online internet communities and give them financial assets to empower themselves. So what this looks like is work for projects like Audius, Friends with Benefits, advisory for the Variant Fund, and then a lot of help just across different DAOs like Forefront, Seed Club, and a bunch of other ones that I'm sure we'll get into on this conversation.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into a bunch of those. One of the things I think is an interesting place to start, and you are, I think, really the epitome of this, is you're certainly a jack of all trades, right? And I think you kind of represent what, at least in my opinion, looks like the future of work, let's say 2, 3, maybe even 5 years from now, but you're actually doing it today. Maybe talk a little bit about your role within some of these different DAOs and how you're kind of a collaborator working with a lot of these decentralized kind of autonomous organizations and what that looks like from your perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would categorize it as an operator and a community steward. What I try and do is make sure that people are on the same page about what we're trying to build, helping to connect people to one another to build things together, and then just trying to be a general voice and advocate for that community. So all DAOs have very different missions and what they're doing, but what I like to do is kind of sit at the center of them, help to get a landscape overview of who are the key contributors here and how do I connect them with one another to make sure that we make progress.
So to that point, let's take a step back. What is a DAO in your definition, or how do you think about DAOs?
I like to classify DAOs as a shared internet community with a bank account. So in the same way that you have a group chat with your friend, if you guys were to pool money together and then start to make decisions on how to spend it, I think that's the easiest way to think about what a DAO is.
Okay. And you certainly play at that intersection of that ownership economy, right? Which I know you have a lot of thoughts around. Maybe let's get into what the ownership economy really represents, this kind of transition to it. And then we could get into where DAOs and certainly NFTs and all these other, crypto assets, what their role is in this. But let's start with the ownership economy and kind of what your thesis is around that.
Absolutely. For those who don't know, Jesse Walden wrote an incredible piece called The Ownership Economy. I'd recommend checking it out. It's a fantastic read. The way that I think about this is if you create value for a network, you should be able to get ownership in that network. And so today in crypto, you see these things called tokens, which basically represent ownership or equity in the parent entity or the parent network. And so what we see today is different platforms you can go in, contribute value, earn a stake in that network, and then use that stake to be able to govern future decisions that happen.
Gotcha. And so do you think, again, playing it back to this kind of future of work, there's a lot of people that you collaborate with that are in a similar position to you, right? Where you may know them from another DAO you're working on, or they may be in, certain Discord groups with you. But it seems like this kind of ownership economy model, it's not necessarily like you're focused on one project at once. And there's a lot of kind of benefits or synergies in a certain way that you can bring to these different organizations that you're working with. I'm curious how you're starting to see that evolve, the people and the friendships that you're making within this space, and how that's playing into this, again, ownership economy thesis.
Yeah, it's very positive sum and cross-collaborative. A lot of the people that I work with are working across maybe 2 or 3 other social clubs or social DAOs at a time. And I think the benefit of this is as you start to see what's working when you're organizing decentralized communities, you can share that thesis with your colleagues and with your friends to better move the industry forward. One of the things that I love the most about crypto is its open source nature. I think this is actually less on a technical side and more on a social side. The idea that as we start to figure out how to build a new industry, we're going to share those learnings with our colleagues. I think that when it comes to ownership, people are able to earn ownership for value they create for a network. There's a high chance that you've discovered where that value comes from when working somewhere else. And you can bring that into a different project, go to a governance forum and say, hey, I have a proposal for how I want to improve this DAO or improve this network. And so long as the other token holders see that as valuable, you then have the opportunity to earn tokens to be able to claim that ownership right.
And what is it about crypto specifically, right, or this Web3 infrastructure, for the kind of uninitiated here, what is it about crypto that makes all of this possible, right? Like, what is the, I guess, like step function improvement on, let's say, a traditional kind of business model or operating business model? What are the big kind of differences to you, and why is crypto so important?
I would say from a high level, the global permissionless nature for anyone to be able to spin up tokens out of thin air. You don't need permission to go and make an Ethereum token. You don't need permission to go and distribute that to people you think are valuable. You don't need permission to go and trade that amongst your peers. I think that there is a world in which this happens in a traditional corporation, but fundamentally the way in which these organizations are structured, it's much more social, it's much more fluid. There's not a lot of working capital required to start up. And I think when you start from that as a foundation, the ethos in which you're building products and services is much different. I like to use the saying that with DAOs, it's community beats product. It's not product meets community. And so you have a bunch of people that come together, they think deeply about what are the tools that we want to see to be able to use ourselves, and they go and build it together. And since it's a very collaborative process, as people come in to help with design or development or strategy, typically tokens are allocated them for the work that they do. And once you ship that product, there's a lot more feeling of ownership and intent in it. And even if it's the shittiest product in the world, chances are people are going to want to use it more because they felt a true sense of ownership when they built it.
And I think that's a really, really interesting point, right? This idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, around the traditional startup model. And I think somebody had tweeted about this, where traditional startup model is you're trying to find or build a community around a product that you've created, right? Whereas this model almost flips it on its head and says, we're now trying to build products for the community that we've already built up, right? Around some type of shared mission or even some type of fluid shared mission, right? Where you kind of have this intersection of, culture and community. I think that concept of now building products to serve a community is a very, very interesting point, and really, really an important one when it comes to thinking about, which DAOs you potentially want to get involved in, but even from an investor standpoint, looking at what the future of, I think, this entire space is going to look like.
Yeah, because I think to your earlier point about why is crypto unique here, when you build those products with the community and you have tokens that represent ownership in that network or in that community, it becomes much easier to ascribe value to it. I think in a traditional startup model, as you're building product, there are definitely going to be early employees that are incentivized with equity, but that equity is typically not liquid, and there's typically not the ability to bring in contributors on a very loose basis. You may contract out people, give them a USD budget to come and do a development sprint or something like that. But with crypto, the fact that you can transfer liquid ownership to your contributors, I think it makes a much more vicarious flywheel where people are not only coming in to, ship the one thing that they've developed, typically they'll stick around. When we were building, we'll get into this later, but when we were building FWB Gallery for Friends with Benefits, we contracted a design firm called Cathedral. They wanted to get paid half of their contract in tokens. And after they finished shipping it, they're still a part of our product team, and they actively work with us. They helped update the style guide. They just went out of their way to help us update our website. We didn't ask them to do that. I think the fact that they got ownership in this community, they felt like they were much more of a part of it. And I think this is a common theme that we're going to see time and time again with all of these DAOs.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.